Now on BBC World News, we examine how Europe might look after the war in Ukraine and its impact on Poland. Global Questions travels to Warsaw.
Hello, you join me in the magnificent central hall of the Warsaw Technology University for this special edition of Global Questions. I've got a terrific audience here who are going to be putting their questions to my panel. And now Poland is pushing for a much more muscular response to Putin from the European Union. After all, it is bearing the brunt economically of hosting 2.5 million Ukrainian refugees. We'll be asking whether Europe is playing a leading role in trying to end the war, or is it not being robust enough in standing up to Moscow? I've got a top panel of politicians from across Europe and one leading commentator who are going to be answering some tough questions from our audience here in Warsaw. So let me introduce you to my guests. We've got Martin Pruszczak, is Poland's Deputy Foreign Minister. He knows Ukraine well because you're a student in Kiev, weren't you?
I was an exchange student in Kiev a couple of years ago, yes.
Great. And Tuppurainen is Minister for European Affairs in Finland. Now, this is a plucky country that has a long border with Russia, and you say you've been in a perpetual state of readiness for war for many decades. Welcome to you. Hanna Hopko, you're an MP in the Ukrainian Parliament until 2019, when you were head of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, but you're now chair of the activist organization Democracy in Action. So welcome to you. Michał Baranowski, from Poland, you're one of Europe's leading political commentators, and you're director now of the think tank, the German Marshall Fund. And joining us from the United States, where he lives, is Andrei Kozyrev, who was the first foreign minister of Russia after the breakup of the Soviet Union, and he was in office until 1996. But you continued, Andrei Kozyrev, in Russian politics for some years after that. So my audience here, please give my panel a very warm round of applause. Now, I know we've got so much to get through, so let's go straight away to our first question, and it's from you, Julia Falkowska. Julia, what do you want to ask my panel?
How can we help Ukrainians, especially those 10.5 million who are either displaced or refugees?
Deputy Foreign Minister, I mean, Poland has 2.5 million of the 3.5 million refugees. The others are all internally displaced people. What can we do? Well,
first of all, thank you very much for organizing this important and timely discussion, and especially the fact that it's being done down here in the capital city of Poland and Warsaw. Answering, Julius, your question, well, first of all, I think we need to stop this barbaric aggression of Russia and Ukraine. I mean, those IDPs or refugees who had to flee the country and are still in Poland, in Germany, in Slovakia, they would love to go home, to be honest. I mean, I've been talking to many of them, and the only thing they want is to go back to join their families in Ukraine. So we have to do whatever is possible to settle up peace down there in Ukraine.
Okay, but what do you do about the humanitarian crisis?
As for now, as you know, Poland has received already more than 2.5 million, because there are only the figures you mentioned. These are the people who cross the Polish-Ukrainian border. But there are a lot of Ukrainians who cross Hungarian border, Romanian border, Slovakian border, and then join their friends, relatives down here in Poland. So what we need to do is, of course, to offer them shelter. And that's what we are doing down here in Poland. Ordinary Poles, local authorities, central government is doing whatever is possible. What else? Of course, many of them, they want to go to the other countries. And if they want to, there are free people. The other countries can also help us with regard to that. And the last what we could do, of course, is to offer more humanitarian assistance through the hub, which is set in Rzeszów in the southern Poland.
But you want money from the European Union to do that. You're saying Poland can't cope on its own.
Well, we can of course handle with this. I mean, our neighbors will try to do our best.
You're asking for help, though.
But of course,
All
I
right.
mean, the more financial assistance, especially from the European Union, that's our joint responsibility. I would say.
Tuti, you are the Minister for European Affairs in Finland. So far, it doesn't seem like those countries that are really bearing the brunt of accepting the refugees are really getting as much assistance from the European Union as they would like.
Well, this is a joint issue and we have to act together and we need to coordinate our actions together. And for that reason, we have already activated our temporary protection directive, which allows Ukrainian refugees to get a temporary residence permit in each and every EU country. And that's already a clear signal that we have solidarity and we want to help. We desperately want to help, especially those that are vulnerable, women and children and people with disabilities. And I would like to see the European Union performing together in the institutional framework of the European Union. We have all the means, now we should show the solidarity.
But you've got Slovakia, Romania, Hungary, and obviously Poland, as we've been discussing, countries in the EU that have been on the front line of the refugees, and others perhaps who've not been so quick to receive some of those people for resettlement.
Well, Finland has always been an advocate for burden sharing, that we need
but is it
solidarity. We are ready for that and we have European instruments for that, but we should activate our institutional framework for that reason. And I hope that we can finally agree on our migration pact, which has been negotiated for too long. Now, this is a high time to act together.
Hannah Hopko, you're Ukrainian, obviously, so what help? What's your answer to Julia when she says, how can we help the Ukrainian refugees and those who are internally displaced?
So I think the best answer to your question is to protect the sky. Because every day Russia is bombarding Ukrainian cities.
It's a specific question about the refugees. We know that the Ukrainians
tomorrow,
want the NATO to police a no-fly zone, but that wasn't the question.
Now we are talking about 2.5 million of Ukrainian refugees in Poland. But as Deputy Minister told, we want to be back home. So this is without stopping the war and punishing Putin. It's not the solution.
But there's a humanitarian crisis that has to be dealt with.
It's not just humanitarian crisis, it's also humanitarian disaster, because 70% of business stopped. Actually, you could see millions of Ukrainians internally displaced in Ukraine. They also need humanitarian aid. But what Ukrainian army needs, it's weapon. It's a maximum military assistance to defend European values, to defend Ukrainian citizens. This is why we are asking President Biden during his visit to Poland. We need anti-tank, anti-missile systems.
We'll come to all this in a while, but in terms of the kind of shelter and humanitarian provision that the refugees are receiving in Europe, are you satisfied? You're based here in Warsaw, you're happy with what's going on?
Of course, I'm very thankful to Poland for hospitality. And we conducted street event and we were singing Ukrainian and Polish anthems. So really, it's very nice, but we were thankful for but we need to be back home.
All right, okay. Michal, I mean, what's your answer to the question? I mean, is the EU doing enough?
I think Hannah's point that they need to be back home is a very important one. So there is the connection between the humanitarian crisis and the war. So, you know, once we stop it, we need to rebuild Ukraine. But when you ask about the people who are already here, for point number one, Poland is the main bridge from Ukraine to Europe. So Poland will need support with the large number of our Ukrainian brothers and sisters.
You've got a 500-kilometer border with Ukraine, haven't you, Poland?
Yeah. Yes, we do. And Poland is really the main hub in their first stop on the journey further west. But it shouldn't be only our responsibility. It shouldn't be only EU's responsibility. It's really world's responsibility because this is the biggest migration crisis since World War II.
And the speed at which it's happened. But just very quickly, I must mention Moldova, because although it's not in the European Union, population of 2.5 million, and it's got more than 300,000 Ukrainian refugees. So actually, per capita, it's got by far the largest number.
By far.
The EU has to do something to help Moldova, right?
Absolutely. but not only the EU, others as well, the West, US as well.
All right, thank you. Julia, I hope that's answered your question. Let's go to our second question, and that's from Anthony Robinski.
What will the increasing number of refugees in Poland, as well as other EU member states, mean for the economies of these countries?
Let's come back to you as well, Deputy Foreign Minister. Yeah.
Well, that's a big challenge for all of us. I mean, for the Polish state and for the Polish economy. Of course, there are positive results also of this fact. I mean, those people, many of them are very well educated. They want to start a new life down here. There are a lot of entrepreneurs trying to establish new business. There were already some rules changed for them, and so the government is trying to help them. But of course, in a short time, it is a challenge for all of us. We need to help them financially. We need to offer them the social benefits. We need to offer them accommodation. Many of them, I mean, the vast majority of those refugees, they are just women with kids. The kids, they must go to school. So the schooling system in Poland needs to be somehow, I don't know, I mean, extended. I mean, more classes, more teachers. This is all very, very important. And to do that, we need, as I said, I mean, support from our partners and allies, mainly
I mean, let's be
EU
honest now, though.
And the NATO, of course.
Just very quickly, because Poland has really been a bit of a kind of rebel member of the European Union. You've had all sorts of disagreements with them over the independence of the judiciary.
There was a kind of family dispute, yeah.
Yeah, family dispute, okay, and they've been withholding funds. I don't know what they're clapping for, whether they agree with you or me or whatever, but anyway, I mean, the fact is they've been withholding funds from Poland. Do you see this as an opportunity of saying to the European Union, look, we are shouldering this big burden now, you must see us in a more favourable light?
I think it's quite natural. I mean, that all the funds which are foreseen, I mean, for Polish economy to support us should be even speed up right now, given the fact that there are 2.5 million people really waiting for a support. So this is a good moment and a kind of also face-saving exit strategy for the institutions of Brussels to give us this money.
Tuti, can the European Union cope with this, or is there going to be a big financial crisis? We're already seeing the reordering of energy policy, which is going to have a huge impact on the cost of living. It already is, and so on. I mean, can the EU cope?
This is a matter of political will, and I'm sure that we will cope with this issue. First, of course, it will be a matter of costs, because like the minister said, we have to offer the refugees daycare for children, we have to offer translation, we have to offer public transport, and so on. It costs. But in the long run, I'd like to see this also as an opportunity to us all, because our continent is aging and we are in desperate need of labor force. So Hannah, for as long as the Ukrainians want to stay, you are welcome in the EU member states. You are welcome in Finland. We would like to receive you, we would like to help you, and we would also like to have you as workers in our labor market, because we need labor force. That is not to say that we are exploiting Ukrainian refugees, not at all. But I would like to see this as a win-win situation after all.
Okay, let's go to our next question now. It's from Anthony Berbecker. Anthony.
Has NATO done everything possible to protect its eastern flank?
Has NATO done everything possible to protect its eastern flank? Michal Baranowski.
I thought you might come this way, but thank you for an excellent question. Look, we as NATO, yes, we have stopped Putin coming to NATO territory, but unfortunately we have failed when it comes to deterring Putin from attacking Ukraine. So we have not done enough to help Ukraine fight and also push back this bloody tyrant. That said, we are just in the beginning of a process of changing NATO, bringing more forces to Poland, to Baltic states, to Romania. So expect over the next year many more forces from the US, from France, hopefully from other NATO members as well, coming in on the eastern flank of the alliance to make sure that we can deter, sort of push back Putin, not only from our borders, but of course, as Hannah said, from Ukraine's borders as well.
Let's go to the United States, to Andrei Kozyrev, former foreign minister of Russia during the President Boris Yeltsin era. So Russia invades Ukraine because it's not happy about the expansion of NATO, but now you've just heard how actually it's getting a stronger NATO. The plan has kind of backfired for Putin, hasn't it?
Definitely. He miscalculated everything. So people who thought that he was a genius, like some people in the United States, if he is a genius who is a headless politician who makes so many mistakes, not only on NATO, but also on the Ukrainian nation, which does exist, and the Ukrainian ability to stand against the invasion and many other things, and even on his own army. His own army is not performing as it was expected, probably even by observers in the West, because Russia, under his rule for 20 years, already 22 years, he's on the top of Russian power, and Russia is declining country, still over-dependent on exports of raw materials, and still with a stagnated economy.
All right, thank you, Andrei Kozyrev. Tuti Tuppurainen, I mean, in Finland, you're not a member of NATO, and yet you've been taking all sorts of measures to protect yourself in case there is a Russian invasion. Of course, I should say Finland was actually an autonomous part of the Russian Empire from 1809 to 1917, and then you're invaded in 1939, and you've got, like, what, 900,000 adults you can call on to take arms if anything happens. So is NATO really that critical to keeping you safe?
We are a very close partner to NATO. We are as close to NATO as one can get without being an actual member yet. But we are part of the Western sphere. I'd like to state it very clearly that Finland is not neutral, not at all. We have joined the European Union in the 90s, and that makes us a part of the Western sphere. And that is clear, and that also what Putin knows and understands. Russia and Finland, Russia is neighboring the EU, not only Finland. And now...
But you've got a very long border. What is it? It's nearly
1,300 kilometers.
Yeah.
And you know, it's there every morning I wake up. Russia is there.
And it
is a reality. It's not going away. And under Putin's regime, it is basically a dictatorship. And we have to take it for seriously. And now Finns are considering whether we should also become member of the NATO. According to polls, the majority of our public is already supporting the membership in the NATO. But we have to have a democratic process in our parliament, the parliament and our institution, including the President of the Republic. We are now running a process, and the outcome might be an application to become a member of NATO. And the NATO's open door policy, it is crucial for Europe's security, it is crucial for Finland and Sweden, and we count on that, and we count on Joe Biden and White House and our transatlantic relationship.
So you heard it here, so Finland may indeed join NATO.
We are considering that seriously.
Well, you're very welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. I will deliver the message.
Yeah, well, your Prime Minister, Sanna Marin...
We in Ukraine will also support Finland and Sweden joining NATO, and actually would also shortly answer on this question. The best way to protect eastern flank of NATO is to help Ukraine to defeat Russia, to stop authoritarian regimes, because now, and supply Ukrainian army with weapons, because this is the way to for victory of democracy, freedom, and actually, as soon as Finland joined NATO, this will be another signal that NATO open door policy is working. And next, after Finland, I hope will be Ukraine.
Do you feel that NATO countries, all the 30 members, are doing enough to help Ukraine? You said, I mean, they're giving you weapons, aren't they? All sorts of weapons, NATO countries.
I think NATO should do more. Why more? Because the fifth article of NATO have never been tested.
Okay, so you've mentioned the no-fly zone. What more do you want NATO to do?
No-fly zone, anti-tank and anti-air missile system, what is needed for us. Also more military assistance. And actually, NATO, I don't understand why membership action plan is not now under the table.
Tell the Deputy Foreign Minister that. Poland's a member of NATO. Go on.
We wait fighter jets from Poland. We met with State Secretary Blinken on March 5th, and we were promised that fighter jets, Su and MiGs, will be in Ukraine delivered. So actually, I have a question. Are you helping us to win or not to
You're
collapse?
looking at me, but you've got to be looking at him.
No,
it was Poland that didn't send the Polish
it's not for Poland.
fighter
It's a
jets.
question to NATO.
Yeah.
Are you helping us
right.
to win or not to collapse? Does morality end at the NATO border? Does humanity end at the NATO border?
Deputy Foreign Minister Martin, what's your answer?
I would say, I mean, that Hannah's question probably is not towards me, towards Poland, because we are, I think, the most active country.
You ask my question.
The most active country when it comes to NATO allies and the EU member states. It's Minister Kuleba, the foreign minister of Ukraine, who just today, being in Warsaw, said that that Poland should be marked with the A grade when it comes to our support to Ukraine. So we are doing really our best. We are trying to encourage other partners, Western allies, the big economies of the European Union to be more.
But Hannah asked about NATO, 30 member countries. You said, oh, we're trying to do our bit. But NATO acts as one big body, and it sounds like it's not doing what the Ukrainians want.
I think
clearly.
we are doing as NATO quite a lot, but of course there is always a room for improvement. Right. There is always a space where we could find opportunities to do a bit more with regard to the in-kind support to Ukraine. And I totally share your point, Anna. We need to do more, but it's not only up to Poland. It's rather up to other allies.
Well, I mean, the US and all the others. Okay,
United Kingdom, a lot of...
with United Kingdom,
Germany, France...
President Zelensky...
Let's talk to them together.
President Zelensky has said that the United Kingdom has been sending the kind of weapons which is a very thin line between defensive and offensive, because, of course, NATO can only send defensive weapons, but Britain has kind of got a fairly elastic definition of that. Very quickly.
My colleague asked a question to your Prime Minister. Are you afraid to come to Ukraine? The same question to President Biden. Are you afraid to come to Ukraine to protect democracy?
Let me just mention that Prime Minister of Poland just paid a visit to Kiev together with the Prime Minister of Czech Republic.
Just follow the example of Polish Prime Minister.
And Slovenia in order to support Kiev.
All right, well, we've got a question about who's visiting where and who and what, and that's from Maximilian Motika. Maximilian, your question, please.
So, hello to our viewers, to our audience, and also welcome to our panelists. My question is a bit complex one, so let me read. We have seen Joe Biden's recent visit to Poland, which was his first visit to Poland since he became the president of the United States. Before the war started on February 24th, the US administration was far less interested in relations with Poland and Europe. So, will the war in Ukraine help to strengthen the transatlantic relations in the longer term? Or once the war is over, will we see that the USA is not really interested in maintaining security in Europe?
Michał Baranowski, this is right up your street as director of the German Marshall Fund. What's your answer to Maximilian?
Thank you very much, Max. Great, Maximilian. Great question. No, I think what we have seen in this war is actually reforging of the transatlantic alliance. Unfortunately, in the fires of this war, this alliance had to be reforged. But we are much stronger than we were there before. And actually, Biden is to be credited for bringing the West closer together. His speech was giving a statement of this. It's also, as you said, I'm sure many of the viewers know, it began changes in Europe. We see Germany changing its position. We see others. Nord Stream 2 is in the freezer. Germany is spending more on defense. But it's not enough just yet. I'm still here with Hannah. We do need to do more because Ukraine and Ukrainians are fighting not only for their freedoms, but for our freedom and for really the future of the West. The problem is that right now, Hannah, you ask, are we afraid? There is a real concern about escalation of the war with Russia. And we have to be serious about this.
We'll come on to that in a moment, but Minister for European Affairs from Finland, Tutti Tuppurainen, what's your answer on the transatlantic relation?
Well, I would hate to see a war as a catalyst. I think this united cooperation between the EU and the United States should have been there, and I welcome it as it is now. And actually, I think it caught Putin off guard, how united and how determined West is in responding to Russia's ruthless attack against Ukraine. So I believe that this alliance continues. I believe that is ever so strong, but of course it needs commitment from us all. But Europe is ready, the EU is ready, Finland is ready, and we count on Joe Biden and we count on the democracy in the United States that we will cooperate together.
Let's see what Andrei Kozyrev says. Again, it looks like a miscalculation by Vladimir Putin then that the war in Ukraine has actually strengthened the transatlantic relations when people all thought it had gone south under Donald Trump and so on and so forth.
Yes, it does strengthen, but I think NATO is much larger economically, militarily, and morally, actually, than declining, again, say, declining Russian regime. And Ukraine is not fighting only for the freedom of Ukrainians and NATO, but also for the freedom of Russia, because it's unbelievable that those guys started the war against our brothers. And so the NATO should do much more. And President Biden in Warsaw said, have no fear. Okay, have no fear. Give them airplanes, the MiGs, old MiGs, and provide them with the anti-air defenses, exactly like Hannah, who is great representative, and I am honored to be with her here.
All right, thanks very much, Andrei Kozyrev. On the bilateral relations, but did you see Joe Biden when he came? I mean, you're in the foreign ministry.
Of course,
did.
Yes.
And did you feel reassured by his words to you and about the transatlantic relationship?
We are right now in the most pro-Atlantic country in Europe. I mean, Poland, regardless of the government, whether it's socialist government, liberal or conservative as it is right now, we are very much pro-American and would love to see the transatlantic bond vivid and strong. And it was like this throughout the years. I mean, our Polish-American alliance is based on a solid foundations. It was President Biden.
So was Biden vivid and strong, as you just said?
It was President Obama and President Biden was the vice president who decided of deployment of American troops as NATO troops in 2016. It was President Trump who decided to strengthen this presence in Poland. And it is right now President Biden deciding about being even more active with regard to eastern flank. So we are absolutely reassured. The Article 5 is ironclad, I would say, and there are no doubts about it. We are more united than ever. Of course, just one bitter comment. I think, and I agree with Michał, that we right now we need to prepare for defense policy rather than deterrence. There were 20 years to deter Russia, and unfortunately, some of our allies, some of our friends from West were trying to do business as usual with Russia. We've lost a bit of time. Unfortunately, we have not managed to really deter Russia. Now is the time to really defend ourselves and to help our Ukrainian partners.
So who's been flaky, in your opinion, then?
Well, it's quite natural. It was already mentioned. We were strongly opposing Nord Stream 2. That was one of those projects.
Are you talking about Germany here and its policy of engagement?
It was you mentioning Germany, not me. But
I was only saying what was on your mind. But I mean, you're talking about Germany's policy of engagement with Russia.
It's not about blaming and shaming right now. Right now, we need to build a unity, but we've lost a bit of time. It was us, Poland, basically warning all the time that Mr. Putin, it's not Mr. Yeltsin, maybe Minister Kozyrev. I mean, in the 90s. Russia was a reliable, reasonable partner. But since 2000, when former KGB officer became a president, it's not anymore. And in 2008, when Georgia was invaded, it was the Polish president standing in the very center of Tbilisi and warning the world. And he said, today it's Georgia. Tomorrow it can be Ukraine, then Baltic states, and then maybe even Poland. So you see that this scenario, unfortunately, is being somehow done.
But just very quickly on the German point. I think the Germans would say, look, in the light of the Ukraine war, we have shifted our position when it comes to Russia. They're saying we're going to wean ourselves off Russian energy by 2024. Nord Stream 2, the pipeline that you refer to bypass Poland and Ukraine to take gas to Germany, has been suspended, and very few people think it will be revived. And they're now also sending weapons, defense equipment.
I would love to believe in this.
Ukraine.
I think Minister Kozyriev would remember that there is this Soviet way of thinking, believe but check. And so we believe our German partners, but then we need to, of course, check whether it's reality or it's just a verbal shift.
All right. Well, I've just given some examples there of how Germany is shifting its position. You talked, Deputy Foreign Minister, about moving from deterrence to defence, which takes us to our next question, and that's from Jurek Robinski. Jurek, please.
Given the circumstances developing in the eastern part of the continent, should the European Union form its own army in order to stop depending on America militarily and be able to react more swiftly to any possible aggression?
Minister Tuuli Tuppurainen from Finland. Your answer to that.
I believe that the EU have every reason to deepen its defence and security policy cooperation. We have the so-called strategic compass for that reason that has been adopted in the Council recently, and it means that we will further strengthen our cooperation in the field of defence. The EU is much, much more than just a military power. It's not a military alliance, it's much more. It's also economic power. We have enormous regulatory power also in the global level, and we should use that influence that we have in order to better promote our interests and values.
European army, a European standing army, there has been some talk revived about that, saying, look, you can't get any consensus from NATO, too many countries, let's have our own kind of smaller coalition European army.
I'd like to emphasize that we have a mutual assistance clause in our articles, Article 42.7, which says that if one country is attacked, the other ones are obliged to help, to assist. And it's very important for Finland. And I think nowadays we all understand that we have to strengthen this solidarity. But at the end, we have NATO. Most of the EU countries are members of NATO. Yeah. And we don't want to create anything that is, competing with NATO.
So
it has to be something that is complementary to NATO. Also, we that are not yet in the NATO, we understand this reality. And the EU has to be something more. And I'd like to see that that is something more that EU can provide with economic power and regulatory power and diplomacy and so on.
Hanna Hopko, would the Ukrainians appreciate something like a European army?
I would say that the actual European army is a Ukrainian army, because now Ukrainian armed forces, they are true defenders of European values. Every day, each soldier, they are defending you. Here sitting now, and we have this chance to discuss, because we have our brave, heroic army defending all of us. So this is, I would like to say, the biggest contribution of Ukraine. We are security contribution to the European
The question
security.
was, should the European Union form its own army? And obviously Ukraine is not a member of the EU, but so what's your answer to Jurek Robinski?
I think first, European nations should help Ukraine to defeat Russia. Okay. This is #1 task.
All right. Michał Baranowski, is this an idea whose time has come, a European Union army?
Look, I fully agree here with the minister that we should not make a competition between EU and NATO. Let's not do that. And then we can see that in this war, it's actually NATO that came through, right? NATO is certainly not brain deaf, as one of the presidents said some time ago. We reforged this transatlantic alliance in this war. Now, so we do need more armies in the European Union. I'm not sure if we need European army.
Okay.
We need basically more
But they're
capabilities.
all spending so much more now on defence, aren't they? Germany says we're going to spend more than 2% of our GDP on defence.
But we
so
are
that's
more
really
effective within NATO because we actually do need the Americans.
Thank you. I need to go to the next question now. Thank you. And that's from Mikolai Rokitsky. Mikolai, your question, please.
Could the war spread to other parts of Europe and trigger a wider conflict? or is talk of World War III much exaggerated?
Let's come to you, Deputy Foreign Minister, on that question about could the war spread to other parts of Europe and trigger a wider conflict, and could World War III break out?
Let's recall what President Biden said a couple of days ago down here in Warsaw, quoting John Paul II, say, do not be afraid. And we as the West, as the collective West, should not be afraid to defend our values, the principles, our civilization.
But will the war
basically is Mr. Putin wants us to threaten, to be fearful of the outbreak of the World War III. Russia is not ready to start such a war. They have problems, logistical problems sorry to say, but in Ukraine, they don't have fuel. They are even, robbing Ukrainian farmers of chicken to eat something. So how would you see them fighting NATO, US, UK? Mr. Putin is just playing this game to threaten us. So I'm not afraid of starting a World War III. What we need to do is to calmly continue our policy of support Ukraine, and we will manage to achieve our goals, which is the sovereignty and the full integrity of our neighbor.
Okay, Tuti Tuppurainen from Finland. Your response.
Yes. First, I would like to say that Ukrainians are fighting for us, for our democracy, our freedom and our values. And we really appreciate that a lot, and we want to send our best support, and we use all the means at our disposal to help Ukraine. At the moment, it is very, very unpredictable. But for instance, in our borders, the situation is peaceful. But for how long can we count on the situation?
Do you think the war could spread? Because you've got your evacuation tunnels already in Finland.
Yeah. We are prepared. We have been preparing ourselves since the Second World War. But of course, nobody wants a war to escalate. But it's not up to us. It is up to President Putin and how desperate he is and what does he want. But if he intends to spread the war, we are ready. We are ready to respond.
But it's Europe is ready.
Definitely.
Do you think the rest of Europe? But do you think that Europeans were not ready and didn't really expect Putin to go into Ukraine in the way he did? The Ukrainians, many of them didn't believe that Putin would start this war, didn't they?
I think we should be prepared for all scenarios. Putin has showed that he has no moral constraints whatsoever. It's a ruthless war that is waging in Ukraine, and we have to be realistic about all the scenarios. At the moment, I think it is our best interest in order to do everything at our disposal to prevent the situation from escalating, to help Ukraine, help Ukraine's independence and territorial sovereignty.
But I have a question to NATO.
Very quick one.
What will NATO do if Putin strikes Sweden or Finland? Just to test the reaction.
Yeah.
So what NATO will do? And we are in Poland. Remember this phrase, who will die for Gdansk? During the World War II, nobody died for Gdansk, and then
we did.
I mean Western, like France and others.
Let's stick to the question. The question was, will the war spread? So you have said, what will happen?
The war is already. This is Russian
spreading.
aggression against NATO started. The battlefield is Ukraine.
All right. So you think the war could spread? Is that what you're saying, Hannah Hopko? Okay. What do you think? Very quickly, Michal.
Very quickly, we are safer today than we were on February 24th, thanks to the bravery of Ukraine.
Right. But was Europe caught sleeping at the wheel? Was Europe caught sleeping at the wheel? Only Finland thought that they should be ready.
Well, Europe US was a little bit better prepared. The question is, when can war spread? And for the war not to spread, we have to stop Putin now. He will go as far as he can until he stopped. So now it's in Ukraine.
Thank you. Sorry to cut you short. Got some more questions. Piotr Szywinski, your question, please.
Are the conditions that Ukraine is proposing in the negotiations a good option? What will proposed Ukrainian neutrality mean for Ukraine and EU relations?
Right, so we don't have huge amounts of time, so I want everybody to answer the questions much more quickly now. Hannah Hopko, President Zelensky of Ukraine has said neutrality is on the table for negotiations so long as Ukraine gets security guarantees. What's your answer to the question?
First,
are they good options?
Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014 by illegal annexation of Crimea, when de facto Ukraine was a neutral state. Neutrality was.
Okay.
So first, security guarantees. When Ukraine gave up with the third largest nuclear power plant and signed the Budapest Memorandum, so then where is the security
guarantee? So that was the Budapest Memorandum in 1994 when the United Kingdom, the UK and Russia said to Ukraine, if you relinquish your stockpile of nuclear weapons, you'll get security guarantees.
Yes.
That's what you're referring to.
This is really important to remind the global community. So we don't believe in any Ukrainian army. This is only security guarantor for us.
All right. Yeah. Minister Tuuti Tuppurainen.
We, the West, including the EU and Finland as well, we have imposed sanctions that are unprecedented in their powerness. So we want to influence Russia and we want to help Ukraine its negotiation position in the peace negotiation. So with these sanctions, we hope that Ukraine will be able to negotiate conditions that are acceptable for Ukraine. It is not for us to say what are acceptable. It is for Ukraine to decide whether the conditions for peace are acceptable or not.
Polish Deputy Foreign Minister Martin Przydacz, what's your answer to this question? Is Ukraine going in with a strong hand?
Well, it will be totally up to the Ukrainians whether they want to be neutral. I don't think so at this very moment, but if there will be any concept of neutrality, it should be secured by the Ukrainian army. But what this neutrality could be for? Is the Russia really threatened somehow by Ukraine? Is the Ukraine invading Russia? No, Ukraine is just want to defend its own or protect its own integrity and sovereignty. So let's not even talk about those provocative thinking of Russia. They are talking all the time that they are being provoked by someone. No, it's Russia being aggressive actor in this game.
Mikhail Baranovsky, one thing that's on the table is that there could be accelerated candidate status for Ukraine to join the European Union if it says we won't join NATO. Is that a good position?
Fantastic. Yes, absolutely. Next day, especially that Russia said that they have nothing against it. Ukraine is more than welcome.
Let's stay with you for a moment because let's go to our next question from Anastasia Petruk, Anastasia, you are a refugee from Ukraine here in Poland. Your question, please.
Hello. My question is, how likely in North Korea, like the right of Ukraine, could it be a stable solution?
Okay, Mikhail Baranovsky, another thing that's been talked about, Ukrainian military chiefs said that Ukraine could be divided into an east that is pro-Kremlin and a west which is pro-Europe. Okay. Your response
thank you very much, Anastasia, for a great question. I think it is important to remember that East Ukraine is not pro-Russian, right? People who speak Russian are actually now very much Ukrainians and for Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity. Thank you, Hannah.
All right, thank you. Let's go to, very quickly, question from Yaroslav Vlodarczyk. Your question, please.
Russia has been an aggressor for over 300 years. For example, participation in the beginning of the World War II, in recent decades to wars in Chechnya, Georgia, Syria, just to name a few. At the same time, it's a country of 140 million people with an economy the size of the medium-sized EU country. So why is Europe afraid of Russia? Why is it allowing it? Are greed, raw materials and nuclear weapon the only and enough reasons?
Okay, let's go to Andrei Kozyrev in the United States, former Russian foreign minister. Are people afraid of Russia?
It looks like, yes, it looks like a giant NATO, which is 20 times stronger economically, at least 20 times, not 20%. And militarily, too. I mean, it looks like this giant is afraid of the dog sometimes because it's 20 times. Imagine difference of 20 times of something. So yes, it looks like it's afraid, and it's afraid of the nuclear weapons.
All right, let's go to Julia Pashkot now for her question. Julia.
Is there a chance of a revolution in Russia? And if so, what will Russia look like post-Putin?
Back to you, Andrei Kozyrev in America for that one.
There is always chance of a revolution in Russia. I lived 40 years in the Soviet Union, And all of a sudden, just like over a year or two, the Soviet Union collapsed, and we had to put together something like good relations actually with Ukraine and other newly independent states. So Russia is unpredictable, and it continues to be unpredictable, unfortunately. So the answer is yes, it can happen now or it can happen later, but it can always happen in Russia.
All right, so there could be a palace coup. Let's go now to our final question. I'm going to come to you all, panel, for a quick final answer. Maciej Tchaikovsky, your question, please.
Thank you for taking my question. To ensure peace and prosperity for people of our continent, Europe must be united, so Winston Churchill said. He even mentioned the idea of the United States of Europe. Should we not, in present circumstances, come back to this and reject the ideas of European nationalists to create Europe of nations?
All right, very quickly, Hanna Hopka from Ukraine. Yeah.
So I think that Europe is not the US, is not Canada. So actually, European nations, they have to defend the values they believed in. So, and Ukraine as a part, as European civilization, because Putin's war against Ukraine is a civilizational war. And we have to be ready for post-Putin world. Like Soviet Union collapsed, the same will happen with Putin. We will see within next months.
Right.
So the West should develop a strategy, post-Putinism and de-Stalinization of Russian society, deputinization of Russian society.
Okay, create a Europe of nations. Could the Ukraine war put the Union back into the European Union? Very quickly, to Ryan. Then.
Oh yes, I believe. And I'd like to say that nationalism is detrimental. We have to keep in mind that when we are defending Europe, when Ukraine is fighting for democracy, we are fighting for our values, not just for our soil and our people. We are fighting for the values that the European Union represents. And that is what Putin is afraid, democracy and liberal society. And that is what we represent.
Michał Baranowski, very quickly.
Okay, unity is absolutely key. We are not united around the idea of federal Europe. Therefore, we do need to stick to our values and preserve... yes, okay.
Minister, 10 seconds.
Ukraine is a European nation fighting for the European values, and that should be the message really heard by all our friends all over the Europe. And it is about protecting our neighboring country and the values we are all based on.
Thank you to all my panel. That's all from this special edition of Global Questions from the Warsaw Technology University. Thank you to my panel, to my audience. We're the programme that brings you the trend lines behind the headlines. From me, Zainab Badawi, and the rest of the team, goodbye until the next time. Thank you.